Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to see such a full house tonight. Welcome to American University's School of Communication. I'm Dean Sam Fullwood, and I'm just overjoyed to greet you for this special world premiere screening event of the new documentary, Upstream, Downriver. This powerful film addresses one of the central issues of our time, clean water equity. It shares the stories of 4 communities leading the way in environmental and climate justice. The producer, director is SOC's own Professor Maggie Burnett Stogner. Professor Stogner also heads American University's Center for Environmental Filmmaking. This film, like much of her work, represents the core values of our school and university. It models how we can come together to find solutions and create meaningful change, how we can speak up, speak out, and get in the way, as John Lewis said, to make good trouble. A number of our students and alumni of our film and media arts program worked with Maggie on this film. I applaud them all for this outstanding effort. On behalf of the entire SOC community, we're happy to have you here in this beautiful auditorium, so please enjoy the show.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Sam Plakin. I am the program manager at the Environmental Film Festival in the nation's capital. The festival runs from March 16th through the 26th, which means that this is pretty much the halfway point. Tons of programs for you to catch both in person and online. If you would like to learn more information about that, please go to dceff.org. You'll find additions there and any updates or changes. I'd like to quickly thank some of our presenting sponsors: the Shared Earth Foundation, the Farview Foundation, the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, as well as our premier sponsors, Jane Watson Stetson and E. William Stetson III. And finally, our major sponsors, HHMI Tangled Bank Studios, Prince Charitable Trusts, Humanities DC, and the Wallace Genetic Foundation. Of course, I also want to thank the Center for Environmental Filmmaking at American University for all that they've done to organize this amazing world premiere of Upstream, Downriver. We just could not pull the festival together without our amazing partners like the Center for Environmental Filmmaking. There will be a Q&A following the film, so I hope folks are going to stick around and enjoy that. I would like to remind you to silence your cell phones, please. And with that, I'll get off stage, and I'd love to invite Maggie Burnett Stogner, Director of Upstream, Downriver, as well as the Executive Director at the Center of Environmental Filmmaking at American University.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's really lovely to see you all here, and I'm really glad that you made it out tonight, a beautiful evening, so thank you for being inside in the theater. I want to thank Samantha and the DC Environmental Film Festival. We've been partners for a number of years, and it's just a great partnership, and it's so, I don't know if you realize, it's the first time we've had an in-person event like this in over 3 years, and I just thank you for coming. Upstream Downriver takes us into communities that are leading the way for clean water justice. The stories are a powerful reminder of the real difference we can make when we all come together. And we could not have made the film without a lot of people coming together to help out. So bear with me as I really want to take a moment to thank so many people that really made a difference here. The financial support from Park Foundation, from American University, from the Dean's Office, thank you, the Brooke Family Foundation, and the many, many individuals who contributed through our fiscal sponsor, Women in Film and Video. Additional thanks again to the Park Foundation and the Walton Family Foundation for generously supporting expansion of the film coming your way next year, and our outreach on water justice. Thank you very much for those who helped create the film. We did have a lot of students and alum involved in this project. I want to say particularly thank you so much to co-producer Marissa Woods, Jeffrey Madison, thank you. My graduate assistants, please wave your hands. There's several of them in the audience here. And the many students and alumni of our film program across the country. I also want to thank our co-producing partners at the Center for Environmental Policy at AU and SPA, especially Danielle Wagner. Thank you. And a special thanks to Amy Butler. Couldn't do it without you. And thanks to, we have a number of key partners, and this is really important when making an independent film because they provide a way for getting this film out to people who can really use it as a catalyst in their communities. American Rivers, the Clean Water for All Consortium, Waterkeepers Alliance, Chesapeake Waterkeepers, River Rally, and others. And a very special thank you to all the people who participated in the film and shared their stories and expertise, two of whom are on tonight's panel, Fred Tutman and Julian Gonzalez. And I think I hear the music playing, so I'll go. But a final thank you to all the SOC staff for their really awesome and abiding support, to those in the booth and to the SOC staff generally who have really supported this film through several years in the making. So thank you all and enjoy the show.
So thanks again for coming out tonight. This is I first had a chance to see this at the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act back in September, and it's no less powerful now. The world debut of this is the Upstream, Downriver, really fantastic. Please welcome our panel tonight. This, starting on my far right, is Fred Tutman, the Patuxent River Keepers. Thank you. Julian Gonzalez, he's with Earth Justice, your senior legislative counsel, correct, with Earth Justice? The incomparable Maggie Burnett-Stogner, and co-producer, associate producer on Upstream, Downriver, Marissa Woods. And I'm Jeffrey James Madison. I'm CEO, co-founder of The Climate, Inc., and co-host of the Climate Daily podcast. I'm also a content producer for the Center for Environmental Filmmaking. So really a special opportunity. So happy to be here to be moderating this panel tonight. So without further ado, I'll go to the questions. I want to start with Marissa, actually, because Marissa, you know, this is it fair to say this is your first major picture that you've worked on? Yeah, and so what I'd love to know is about what you might have learned from making this film. What were some of the key highlights and biggest takeaways?
My mic working?
Yeah, you're good.
I think what I learned from this film working with Maggie is I was really, really impressed with Maggie. She is incredibly energetic and it's just go, go, go all the time. But it was really enlightening to realize how much work goes into a documentary production and how many people are involved with the production, from the alumni to current students and all the different people that are connected to the Center for Environmental Filmmaking. And yeah, it was really fascinating to learn how much goes into a documentary production. And I was really inspired and energized by the different activists that we got to spend some time working with, from the grassroots folks all the way up to people who are in leadership positions with the EPA. Mm-hmm. And they're all, again, so very energetic and inspiring, and it was just really surprising and inspiring to kind of have to get a sense of the pace that these people are going out all the time to do the work that they do, which I thought was really inspiring to see.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. Tell us, were you deep into the climate change movement or the environmental movement prior to connecting with Maggie Burnett-Stogner and Upstream Downriver?
I'd say before I started in the program with the Center for Environmental Filmmaking, I had an interest in the environment, but I know a lot more now than I did when I first began my program at AU as a graduate student. And I'd say I learned a whole lot from, I think that's me, from the people that we got to work with.
Yeah, cool deal. Is it something you think you'll continue, an area where you continue, or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm inspired to learn more. I think when you get into a certain topics, you learn. One of the things you learn is how much you don't know.
Right.
And so I'm really curious to find out about, to keep on learning about all the things that I have started to scratch the surface of, but there's still so much more to it.
Cool deal. I can say from personal experience working with you during that large conference where we worked and did the interviews, and then the day after that at I didn't get a chance to go to Haynes Point for the native ceremony, but to see you working with Maggie, I would put you in that same category of high energy, go people. So count yourself as one of them, definitely.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah. So Fred Tutman, if you would, you started out in television. You started out in broadcast, and then you somehow flipped into environmental law. And then from there, you became what you currently are. What inspired you to take that leap?
You know, what fascinates me is every year someone asks me that question and I have a different answer. As I get older, my perspective changes on it. The truth is, this is the right place for me now. That was the right place for me then, and I use every bit of everything I learned and acquired along the way of being a journalist and traveling and dealing with media in this work. This is the most demanding work I've ever done, and all that earlier stuff prepped me. So it was the environmental stuff that excited me. It was the stuff I worked on in my media career that I always cut my rates for and did on the on the fly or pro bono. But I wanted to get my hands on the actual issues. The more I started making films about this stuff, the more I wanted to get involved with the issues themselves. I just felt like, what do they say in Jerry Maguire, I didn't like my place in the scheme. I wanted to change where I sat. And so law was portable. Mm-hmm. Law was something I could pretty much go into politics, which I don't want to do that. But the idea was I had mobility because the TV job dogged me. To be honest, people kept saying, well, so when are you going to get back to your senses and come back and make some TV shows? And it's like, I'm done with that. Great that you're doing it, but I've moved on.
Yeah.
So law created a separation, gave me a little bit of a firewall. Changed my cell phone number, changed my friends. See guys on airplanes now that I used to work with at CBS, and they're like, oh, I thought you were dead. Seriously, that happens.
No, I get that. When you change your perspective, sometimes you change your allies, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of which, you got into, am I wrong or am I right when I said the Patuxent River watershed is the largest in the eastern seaboard of not the United States?
No, it's the longest and deepest inside of the state of Maryland. It stops, and it starts and ends in Maryland.
So I am wrong in that. So
like my family ancestry, they never got out of Maryland, basically, as near as we can tell. They got in there somewhere, but they never got out.
Even though the Patuxent River system is only in Maryland, it's the longest and deepest, it has tremendous impact on the eastern seaboard, and also with the local communities that surround it. Your passion, if I understand correctly, has always been getting the local communities to be involved. And can you speak for a moment about why it's so important for local communities to care about the rivers and the tributaries and the streams around them?
I think people have to engage the environment on their own terms. We're not all at the same table for the same reasons,
Right.
Like the Pope's encyclical. People say, see, he's with us. No, he's with us for his own reasons, if you read it carefully. And I think that's true generally. We have to have people being themselves in these movements. They're much more powerful movements, I think, if we empower people to fight the fights that are meaningful to them, and they own those fights. And that's work you cannot defund. I think that's really, really important. That is work that lives on the ground, that's legacy work. If you can help a community stand up and fight, he knows exactly what I'm talking about, because that's a lot of what Earth Justice is doing.
Sure.
Right? So yeah, that to me is compelling work. You have to like people.
Yeah.
You have to be interested in what's happening in communities. It's not too compatible with the big green business model. It's something we struggle with, frankly, because those guys need to brand the issues to themselves and they compete with other institutions for big money because they employ a lot of people.
Right.
But on the ground, the folks who are fighting for getting rid of that smokestack or, too many trucks, that's the issue I'm working on right now. I have a big case next week with like just too many trucks. That's on the ground, and people have to fight their own fights. They build power, they build leadership. Anybody in this room think we don't need to build more leadership in this country? Right? Look where the leadership pool comes from. It's all these old folks.
Yeah.
Right? We need young leaders. So that's hugely important work that cannot be replaced by big green work. It's different work.
Good stuff. Right, thank you. It's like all hands on deck kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, Julian, have you ever tried to like recruit him with his law chops to come to Earth Justice?
You might put me out of a job.
Well, we're a client sometimes. We've worked with Earth Justice. We have compatible values, and that's saying a lot, actually.
And so let's speak to that. I mean, Earth Justice Earth needs a good lawyer. Earth Justice. And so you got involved. Talk a little bit about how you got involved, and then I'm going to ask you about water quality.
Sure. So a lot of my work at Earth Justice, my title is Senior Legislative Counsel, which doesn't really mean anything. I'm a lobbyist. That doesn't really mean anything either. Most of my job is actually not talking to folks who work for members of Congress here in DC. It's talking to folks like Fred in different communities who are fighting local battles, who are working to build power, build partnerships in their communities and outside of their communities. And a lot of that coalition work means I get to work with lots of different groups and people in different places. And one of those coalitions, you might have heard them mentioned or seen their logo on the screen, is called the Clean Water for All Coalition. And that coalition is a group of big organizations, small organizations, water keepers, community groups, traditional environmental groups, groups that you may not consider environmentalist groups upon first glance, and they're all working together to fight for cleaner water for everybody. And this effort is something that caught our eye because a lot of our work is inherently communications work, even though most of us are policy people or lawyers or community organizers, because really what this comes down to is education and messaging. It's getting folks together in different places who maybe speak different languages, sometimes metaphorically, sometimes literally, and building power together, and that requires talking to folks, communicating, and then carrying that message on to people here in DC, people in your local towns who are elected, to newspapers, on Twitter even, like wherever you're talking to folks, at the dinner table, to kids. So we really jumped at the chance to get involved in a project like this because it's really aligned with our values and goals.
Thanks for that. I also want to take a moment, speaking to truth to power, if any of you have questions for the panel, we are going to have a Q&A at the end in just a moment. We don't have a microphone to pass around. That's the bad news. The good news is we have this lovely podium microphone that if you're willing to stand and then stand at the podium and then ask your question, we'd love to have the question from you.
Yep.
And we'd love to have the question from you from the microphone so that we can have it for posterity on that which we're recording. So if you have any questions, please feel free to begin to line up. I will start at a cue from Sam, who is the CEF producer here. We will start to ask questions, or if you just wave your hand wildly, we'll gesture you up to the microphone. Maggie, aside from the fact that this coincided perfectly with the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, what inspired you to make Upstream Downriver?
I think about that a lot, and I grew up in Berkeley, and those of you who know me well, yeah. But not just that, I grew up with a mother who was really a water warrior, and I remember from a very young age, she'd go down to City Hall and, provide commentary and park us little kids in the corner and say, put some stamps on those envelopes, we're mailing those later. She really, I think, embedded in me a deep belief that when we care about what's in our own backyard and we take action and we come together and we speak up and we make our voices heard, we make some noise, that we can make a difference. And I think I've felt in the last few years that people have kind of forgotten that we are the government. the people is the government, and that we can make a difference, and particularly as both, I mean, we're both great examples of this. You make a difference in those backyards, in those communities that are fighting for clean water justice, for air, clean air justice and equity in our own backyards. It's hard to care when it's like 30,000 feet up, but it's really easy to care when you see it happening right down this road, right, next door. So, that's a genesis. I think that's what keeps my energy up. I am a little hyper, but I think that's really what keeps my energy going is that, I see the difference, and when you have great stories to tell and you let people just share their stories and inspire others, we really, start to find some hope there.
So I spent 10 years as an adult in Los Angeles County, so very familiar with the LA River system. It didn't surprise me about the billions of gallons of water that are wasted, right? That they do annually. I say we still, because honestly, I am a California native. I was born there, Southern California.
My parents both Southern California.
All right, cool. But what surprised me from this movie was Lowndes County, right? Was there one particular thing in making this movie that surprised you completely, that you had never known before, that stood out more than any of the others?
Wow, that's a hard question because there were several things that surprised me. Lowndes County was an eye-opener, not just Lowndes County, but that there are 2.2 million people in this country without sanitation infrastructure. But I think the thing that surprised me the most was something we came to late in the edit. You want to end the film with that great quote or that statistic. And so I'm searching around and seeing the statistic that less than 4% of the water on our earth is fresh water. I was like, no, I gotta fact check that. I'm gonna fact check it again. I'm gonna fact check it again. I cannot believe that. And it just drives home the point that it's a finite resource, and we need to take care of what we're doing because that's really small. And so I think if there was any one thing I could point to, but there were many things. I mean, one of the things I love about documentary is you go into communities you haven't been in before. You meet people you haven't met before. And Fred I've known for a while. Helena had not met before. And you spend time with them, and they share their lives with you, and you get to know them, and it's it's a constant kind of learning process. But I also think you take away, at least I do, that we have a lot of shared values, and that's what we can really rally around. It doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. We have these shared values that we can come together around, and that's what brings us together, and that's what we really need to do.
That's nice. Anybody have a question that they are willing to walk up to the microphone and ask?
Shout it out.
Come on up. Thank you. We appreciate that. You said something while he came up. Well, I've forgotten about it, so it doesn't matter because it's perfect timing.
Hi, good evening. I was speaking to Maggie before the movie started, and we talked about what I consider the irony of the start of the film focusing on the EPA. And you saw a picture of Richard Nixon walking down the aisle. They didn't mention his name. And he belonged to one of the famous political parties in this country, which now opposes every environmental measure that is being undertaken. In fact, I think the statistics are the EPA was virtually destroyed under the Trump administration. About 50% of the funding, 50% of the staff. We lost 4 years at a time when we are on the brink of complete environmental devastation because of this famous political party. Okay, end of the irony part of this story. But thank you for bringing that out, that we started environmental protection, and hopefully under the current administration we will have some revival. The two pieces of eye-popping information that came out of this movie, that 50% of the waterways in this country are unfit for swimming or fishing. Mind-boggling. I thought it would be something like 20%. And that the salmon is near extinction, which means it's probably an endangered species. I don't know whether it's been declared that. I mean, we knew about the large-scale salmon farming that's taking place, that's destroying, but the habitat being destroyed, and that was scary. And when you talk about 50% in this country of waterways being polluted, can you imagine what the global situation is like? I'm pretty sure, I originally hail from India, and probably all of you know this. I would think the Indian estimate for polluted waterways is probably close to 80%. The Ganges River, the most holy river for the Indians, is probably the most polluted river on the face of this. I have the joke which says that people, the religious Hindus go and bathe in that, and they probably don't get any major illness because there are so many species, bacteria, they all eat each other up. That's my theory of that. But I'm just saying, so on a global scale, it's frightening. If it's India, I'm pretty sure it's China, it's probably many other countries in what is called the global south. Now we don't use the word third world, it's called the global south, whatever that's supposed to mean. And where does this all lead to? In my opinion, Anthropocene, the age of humans, is going to be known for the self-destruction of the human species because of its own depredation of the environment. I mean, the age of dinosaurs came to an end because of an external factor. The meteors came and, blew up the earth. But Anthropocene is going to end, and we are going to be responsible for this. I just want to end with one hopeful story about cleaning up waterways in this country. I lived in New England for many years, and if any of you have lived in New England, you might have heard of the Merrimack River. Right up to the 90s, it used to run a multitude of colors, red, green, blue, yellow. These were the effluents from the textile factories on the banks of that river, which were polluting, which were turning that rivers with all those colors. And due to two factors. One, due to mandatory restrictions on discharging effluents into the river that was put on the factories. And secondly, because of globalization, the factories in Lowell, Massachusetts, and many other factories bordering the river were forced to close down because of globalization and factories moving to China. So I would like to end on that hopeful note. At least I know about one river. And probably the Charles River in Boston was also cleaned up. I don't know too much about that, but I know about the Merrimack River. It's a big story, how it has the natural color of water. But anyway, thank you once again for the film.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. The one last note I want to bring up, if you don't mind, Julian, just quickly. On the Climate Daily podcast, we recently celebrated the 6th anniversary of New Zealand declaring the Whanganui River in New Zealand as giving it personhood, right? Giving it legal status. And the question that I have is, do we think that might work as a template or a precedent that might be set to apply to other waterways here in the United States in an effort to make sure that they have the kind of rights of a person so that they too can be defended legally and cleaned?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You heard the gentleman who just shared some thoughts and perspectives on the opposition here in DC to solutions like that. They're not going to stand for anything like that. That doesn't mean that's not the direction that we need to go, and there's a lot of folks in different places in the country that are trying to head in that direction anyway, because that's what fighting for this stuff means. There's a lot of places where some states have environmental protection enshrined as part of their state constitution, for example. So in some more forward-thinking states, that's exactly what they're trying to get at. And by having that stuff in the Constitution, it gives more legal standing to take action to protect, those rivers, those tributaries, those lakes from pollution. Really, at a more higher 30,000-foot level, I think what this speaks to is the need to just develop a public consciousness in favor of protecting this stuff. And that's not to say it's not there. Like you said earlier, it's not really a political issue, right? If you just ask any random person in any random state if they think water should be protected by the government, they will say yes. It's not a red or blue thing, and there's polling to back that up. The key is getting enough noise about that so that it forces the hands of people who would rather not do that here in DC. And the only way to do that is to do things like enshrine the rights of water at the state level, or with personhood rights, or just anything from rallies to protests. These are all different forms of the same thing. Just showing support for this, and not just passive support, but active, demanding action, going out and taking it, right? Like environmental justice is not, it's like any other justice. It's not something that will happen automatically. Like we gotta go get it. And you have to work together publicly to go get it, which is why I think it's so important and so great that we have events like this and the film festival and the School of Communication, because like I'm a policy wonk, and I can tell you about whatever sections of the Clean Water Act and a bunch of other boring stuff, but like ultimately this comes down to how well can we talk about these issues. And until we talk about them more effectively and more loudly, then we're not gonna get down that route. But I don't think that's like predestined. I think we can get there. You see a lot of these communities, you heard about the gentleman talking about in Massachusetts, the progress that they've made. Where I'm from in New York City, in the Bronx, there was dolphins in the Bronx River last month. They might have got lost, but they didn't die.
They didn't die.
So that's pretty new, and that's pretty great.
That's right.
So we can get there.
Yeah, we could. Anybody else have a question? Great, thanks.
Hi, my name's Joseph. I had a question for Maggie. What was like the reasoning behind the communities that you chose to document in the film?
Oh, great question. It was so hard. There's so many communities that deserve having their stories told, and we're looking forward to expanding the film, thank goodness. But there's so many communities. We wanted to show of different communities in different parts of the United States. So part was geographic, but part was really showing different facets of how people are dealing with the different issues in their communities. So, you know, LA is a super urban, I mean, Fred or the Patuxent, you know, that's just an entire, you know, affects the Chesapeake Bay, but it's so local, but it's also this bigger statewide issue. I mean, it's, and the runoff issue, the community regreening, then the the sanitation issue. So it was really trying to find 4 really strong community activist stories that just shined, you know, just spotlighted different facets of the issue.
Thank you.
That's a
But
great
I
question.
feel like I just touched, you know, it's just like putting a big toe in the ocean. You know, there's
Thank
a
you.
lot more. Yeah.
Anybody else have a question? Sam? Okay,
Sam.
here we go.
I would just love to know, now the film is out in the world, Maggie and Marissa, what's next for the film? How are you going to use it, and where?
You know, hopefully all over the place. We're doing festival circuit now, so it's in the Annapolis Film Festival. We'll be at the Kennedy Center River Run International Festival in April. But beyond that, and I think this is super important, is the different stories in the film are being made available to the different communities so that they can use, you know, kind of short form. Like take, so Catherine in Lowndes County already used her story, that whole footage, for a U.S. Climate Action Network presentation that she did. And same with the LA and the East Yard communities, environmental justice communities. So I think that idea of being able to make the footage available to the communities to use more locally is super important. And then we hope to expand the film and keep it going. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think one of the other hopes for the film is, I think early on before I got involved with the film, there was some preliminary research where the production team learned that a lot of people don't even know that the Clean Water Act exists, or if they know that it exists, they don't know what it says. So I think we also are hoping that it'll be a tool to introduce people to the Clean Water Act and introduce people to how they can take ownership of it and understand what the promises are of the Clean Water Act for each and every American.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's being made, so you can go to our website, upstream-downriver.org, and see where upcoming screenings are. And also just, we're adding some toolkit materials. It's also available through New Day Films, so you can just go to the website, you get all this information for educational, so that it can be used in schools by environmental lawyer, law school, you know, the next generation of environmentalists. We're just really trying to get it out there into communities where it can be used as a catalyst for engagement and action.
Fred, you said on that note, you said at one point in the film that the Patuxent River is now, it's the irony is it started the movement and now we're back to square one. How do you see potentially using this as a way, this film in local communities to be able to rally the troops?
Yeah, the film is important public education and also important context. I've actually met members of Congress who were really dim about the existence of a Clean Water Act. Literally, like, really? No, there really is such a thing. I'm serious. It's not on everybody's vocabulary. But let me say, this is really, really important. In the 1940s, 50s, 60s, as these rivers in Maryland started to go downhill, there was no Bay movement. What caused the Bay movement was the creation of the Federal Clean Water Act. And then weeks later, those people who on the Patuxent started suing the hell out of the state of Maryland. That's what happened. They fought them to a draw. Senator Bernie Fowler had a cognizable political base. I know all this because when I had heart surgery, I had a long recuperation, I had plenty of time, I had a dryer. And I went and found the oldest guys who had been fighting on the Patuxent.
Okay.
And this is the story. This is so important, and I'll collapse it because we obviously short of time. So the deal is, if you had a cognizable political base, you could fix a river. It got done in less than 4 years. So all this stuff about it takes generations. No. In Maryland, we cleaned the darn river up, but the deal they made was antiquated. It really covered kind of 1960s and 70s vintage, you know, realities on the river. But also, they couldn't get anything passed in the General Assembly of Maryland unless other watersheds were involved. So the governor at the time said, let's start a Bay program. My point being, all of this stuff that's huge now, that didn't exist. It all came into being because there was a cognizable political base that was willing to hold the system hostage. They went to war with the state of Maryland. They didn't go to trial. The state wimped out. That's why there's a Patuxent River Commission, the only river commission in the state of Maryland. That's why that river is really empowered. Well, what happened? It got diffused into a huge vacuous Bay movement that thinks a C- is progress. Okay?
Okay.
I'll shut up there, but you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
We can change these outcomes, right? But we need to focus on the problems, right?
Keep it local, get a cognitive political base.
And have a cognitive political base, and you can make that change, and it doesn't take forever. You don't have to pass this legacy to your kids. You can fix it next week if there's a big enough base.
That is something fantastic to take away. I want to leave it right there because what you're really saying is the same thing as upstream, downriver, right? The things that are upstream of us affect us downriver, and that's knowing that we have the power that this movie offers. So thank you, Maggie Burnett-Stogner, Fred Tutman, Julian Gonzalez, and Marissa Woods for your participation in this panel, but mostly in making a fantastic movie. Thank you. So, by the way, we've got a little QR code. If you've got a minute and you want to, if you're able to, please. We're about to put that up. Check out our QR code and for all the goodies that come from that. I will not bore you. I'm only going to entice you with the idea that the QR code has its own special treasures. So thank you for that, and we're looking forward to that. We're going to get that up in just a second. There it is.
And we have, and we have a dessert reception. Please continue the conversation, share with each other. I know there's a lot of ideas in this room, so I hope you keep the conversation going.
Thank you all for coming
Thank
out
you.
tonight. Thank you.